Hello and welcome everyone to the next Foreman case study. Your host Gilvin here, and I'm very happy to welcome today a member of the community who's been very busy with the proxy side of things in the last month or two, and that's Matt Nicholson from Harvard. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to have you on. So the usual spiel before we start. If you want to get involved with the case study as we go through the live broadcast, then you have three methods to get in touch with us. You can use the Q&A app on the Google Plus stream. You can talk to me in IRC in #theforeman on Freenode, or you can ping us on Twitter #theforeman or @foremanproject. So with that said, let's get straight into the case study. So Matt, why don't you start by well, let's put the theme out. I've got it in the slides there, right? We're going to talk about Infoblox. We're going to talk about plugins, smart proxy plugins, but maybe we'll go wider. Talk a little bit about infrastructure, integration, that kind of thing. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and so where Foreman fits in for you?
Sure. So currently working at Harvard University Medical School here in Massachusetts, USA. I've been doing systems administration, kind of DevOps stuff in recent years for about the last 10 years. Primarily working in HPC shops, so a lot of research computing, dealing with researchers, basically running the computers they can run their research on. And I've been using Puppet and Foreman for a lot of that for about 7-8 years now, it seems like.
Cool. Sorry, I muted myself there. No, that's cool. That's a topic close to my heart. For those who don't know my history, I used to work in high performance computing many years ago, before we had wonderful tools like Puppet. Man, that would have made my life easier.
It does.
Fantastic. Okay, so great background. So Foreman, presumably are you using just for front end for Puppet, or are you doing provisioning as well? Presumably.
So when I originally was introduced to Foreman, it was actually just for reporting. Provisioning hadn't really been added to it yet, and I was really just looking for a good dashboard for Puppet reporting, and it fit that role great. I was kind of a little disenchanted with the what at the time was Puppet dashboard, and since then I've just kind of followed the project, played around with provisioning, here and there in various jobs, and in my current gig, we decided to go with it, kind of whole hog for a new HPC cluster we're building. Specifically, looking at discovery to really be able to just bring up, bare metal systems really fast without having to do a lot of manual entry of the data, for the systems, things like MAC addresses, etc. So I've been using Foreman for a number of years now, but kind of really just digging in the provisioning the last 2 or 3 years.
Cool. That echoes my story as well. That's exactly where I came into Foreman. Dashboards and then working for that, and obviously that's why we architect it in such a way that you can turn bits off, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's great. I love the flexibility.
Yeah, it helps people get started with what is otherwise a very complex beast, right? You can just pick one thing you're interested in and get on with it. So it's really cool to hear that you're using discovery. Maybe we'll get back to that, but obviously we did the last 2 case studies on discovery, so don't want to get too locked into one topic. Awesome though it is, and I would say that because I helped write it, but yeah, it's a topic we've covered. We'll come back to it if there's time, maybe talk a bit about how you're using it, but
Sure.
let's talk a little bit about the Infoblox stuff then. So this is what we build on the agenda, so let's talk a little bit about that. Why don't we start with a quick summary of what Infoblox is? So what are we talking about here?
Sure. So Infoblox, I actually have just been introduced to it within the last 6 months or so. I've been in shops that the network team used it, but I've never really had access to it or interfaced with it directly myself up until recently. Infoblox is basically, from my perspective, it's ISE, DHCP, and bind with essentially a nice database component backing it all, and a nice REST API, and therefore a pretty decent web interface in front of it. So you can do things like basically HA between your systems, failover. Kind of easily set up different DNS views. It has role-based access control, so we can, for example, with the Foreman integration, that user only has access to do certain things on certain networks and within certain DNS zones, as opposed to kind of all the DNS for the medical school at Harvard. So yeah, it's basically just kind of a fancy DNS DHCP implementation as far as I'm concerned.
Cool, interesting stuff. I mean, I've had a look at their stuff. I know there's more to it than that. They offer other products, but for the purposes of what we're talking about today, that's the bit that matters, right? So we're talking about a commercialized bind and DHCP system. Cool. So presumably that provides nice API.
Yep. It has a full REST API, which is pretty nice. And when I started to work on the plugin, there's actually someone had already written a really nice Ruby gem for interfacing that API. So a lot of the kind of abstraction there was done for me. But yeah, the API is great. You can basically do anything you would normally do through the kind of click-heavy web interface through the API.
Cool. That's always good to hear, right? And good.
Yeah.
I mean, this is we're getting into the power of open source here, right? Someone's done the heavy lifting for you, right?
Absolutely.
You've got these bindings. Cool. Okay. So I've got a picture. You've got reasonable infrastructure. You've been doing reporting for a while. That's cool. Now you're looking at provisioning, and you want to hook into this thing that you've already got, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So the story there really is we're in the early stages of building out a new HPC cluster. Shop I'm in right now. Previous cluster was kind of built, not silo is kind of a too harsh a word for it, but kind of off on its own to the side, had its own DNS, DHCP implementation, kind of inside that little walled garden. And we have a whole infrastructure group that runs our storage and does, the school's networking. And so we decided with this new project, we wanted to leverage as much of, the existing infrastructure as we could, not reinvent the wheel, not go off on our own if we didn't have to. And so a decision was made to go with Infoblox since they already had that. We knew it had an API. We knew there wasn't an existing integration, but figured, we could certainly try to do it. Worst case, we could probably script something up, and real worst case, just use the web interface, kind of as is. So when that decision was made, I just kind of started poking around the API when I had free time. Like I said, found that gem, and then just kind of went from there, slowly building the plugin.
Cool. So yeah, let's move on and talk about the plugins a little bit then. So obviously you came onto the mailing list about a month or so ago, 2 months ago, something like that. Yeah, it's a little while. And I have to admit, from my perspective as the community guy for Foreman, it totally caught me out, right? Because normally I hear everything that's going on in the community. People come in, they ask questions, they get stuck on things, they come and chat. Now, I may not be able to answer the questions. In fact, I usually can't. I kind of lost my technical chops somewhat. But I know it's there, right? And then you come on the mailing list with these finished plugins, and I was just blown away, right? I was like, this is fantastic. This is exactly why we like doing plugins, right? So presumably then, you didn't really hit any roadblocks doing this.
Yeah, not really. I had seen, I'd started looking around to see if anyone, had obviously to see if there was a plugin in existence, if someone had started one. I saw, a couple threads and issues open of someone kind of starting, some plugins. It looked like kind of before there was, the plugin architecture for the smart-proxy, when it was just kind of more of a monolithic, code base. So I started looking at that and started kind of playing around, writing my own little CLI wrappers around that gem to kind of get a feel of how I was going to, interact with Infoblox. And then, kind of just in time with, I believe it was the 1.11 release came out, and, there was the DNS proxy plugin template available. And, that was a huge help, because it was, the exact plugin I needed to write. I just had to basically fill in the methods and have it do the things I needed to do, which I could essentially kind of forklift the things I was doing in my little CLI wrapper kind of right into that, since it was the same, kind of the same idea as, make an A record, make a pointer record, that's about delete an A record, delete a pointer record. So that's kind of where I started going. And yeah, I didn't, with the DNS plugin, didn't really hit any roadblocks. The DHCP plugin, certainly there was kind of a lot more there, a lot more nuance to, kind of how you're going to manage DHCP, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And there wasn't at the time a template available for that. So it was kind of, a little bit of feeling around in the dark. So really just focus on the DNS plugin to start. For the DHCP plugin, luckily I, kind of started to stub one out, and someone else, I'll actually go look up their GitHub name to give them proper creds there, kind of had already started working on one. I believe was the user that had, started one kind of the monolithic code base. And let's see, who did this? And he submitted its class, KLAAS. So whoever you are, class, thank you very much. He submitted a big PR pretty early on that was, kind of laid a really great foundation for the DHCP plugin. So after that, I just had to kind of clean it up a little bit, tweak it. Some of the things, in that PR were kind of, I wouldn't say site specific, but just were not specific to our implementation of Infoblox and how we wanted to interact with it. And so it's just really kind of adding some flexibility there. Infoblox's ability to make these things called host records, which are kind of your all-in-one DHCP DNS record. We were looking to manage kind of more granularly, so actually have a DHCP reservation, have a specific A record, a specific pointer record, and kind of manage more traditionally. So it was really just a matter of kind of adding some logic in there and, config option to say, do you want to do a host record, or do you want to use, fixed addresses to allow that flexibility in the plugin, and really just write up those methods, and then started testing it. And once I got it going, that's when you heard from me. That's, ping the email list and say, hey, this works for me. Hopefully someone else can, get some use out of it and help me, improve it and keep it going.
Yeah, it was very cool. It was very cool to see. Sorry. It was, as I say, it did catch me out, because normally that doesn't happen. But as you say, the work that went into 111 from Dimitri and the rest of the team on the proxy, all the contributors there, to split out those provider backends for the proxy, for each part of the proxy API was absolutely perfect timing. And of course that's continued into the 112 release for Puppet. So that's going to be really interesting to see where that goes as well, because as soon as you start being able to do provider backend on anything, well, how far do you want to generalize this, right? So we just had a question in from the community, actually, but I think you pretty much already answered it as well, because someone's just asked the very same question. Did you run into any trouble with the host records versus A plus pointer records? And pretty much answered that, right? There is a way around it.
Yeah, it was just really a matter of kind of writing up some different methods, like I said, there's a config option in the DHCP plugin to allow you to specify which one you want, and based off of that, at creation time or deletion time, it'll kind of try to do the right thing. Again, with the great Infoblox gem, those are just different, objects you call with the basically identical methods on them. So yeah, it was that was pretty simple.
I'm intrigued by that, actually. Let me dig into that a little bit more, because so this host record, correct me if I'm wrong, it's both, right? It's the DNS, the DHCP, maybe other things, I don't know. But the proxy doesn't really have a concept of a single place to put that, right? So is that something you're kind of bodging into one or other of the channels? Like, are you doing it all through the DHCP or all through the DNS?
So if you were to use host records with the DHCP plugin, it would essentially take care of DNS for you. So I imagine if you were using that, you then essentially wouldn't have Foreman, manage DNS for that system or
right.
And it would just kind of happen by nature of adding it to DHCP. Gotcha. Like I said, we in my shop wanted to be a little more granular, so we wanted to manage DHCP, then separately manage manage DNS. So with just the fixed record, then it's just that. It's just a reservation in DHCP for you.
Right. And does the host record then invent a name? Because the DHCP doesn't take a name, right? Or does it? Actually,
it can take a name. Yeah, it can take a name. It's just kind of a identifier. So yeah, with the host record, you basically give it a name. You basically just give it a name, a MAC address, and an IP address, and it will essentially create all those records for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So yeah, you kind of take that part away from Foreman and say, no, you're not managing DNS. We've got it covered.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was sorted out. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, because let's face it, it's a pain to set up otherwise. So that's cool. So how's it gone since you put that email up on the mailing list? Have you had much feedback? People using it?
I haven't had much feedback. I mean, other than you asked me to do this, which has been great. I haven't had a lot of direct feedback. I don't think I've really seen many issues or PRs opened on the plugin yet, which I guess is a good thing, because if people are using it, then it sounds like people are using it successfully, I hope. I'd certainly like to get it packaged up. It's something I've been starting to look into, kind of matter of free time to kind of work on that, because in my environment, I'd love to have it kind of deployed in a more production-ready fashion than just a gem that's, the gems are obviously built and published up on Ruby gems, but I'd love to have an actual package for it. So yeah, so far it's been quiet, but I'm certainly hoping that with Infoblox being kind of a big enterprisey solution for people, that people kind of running Foreman and other open source utilities in an environment where they have these kind of more enterprisey tools will want to make use of this.
Cool. And you heard it here first, guys. There's a contribution opportunity there. Do some packaging.
Yes, please.
Get some credit. I mean, it's been a while since I looked at the packaging, but in general, it's not a massive job. The RPMs are slightly more work than the devs because the devs cheat. That doesn't mean that the devs are doing it right by any stretch of the imagination. The RPMs are doing it right, but it does mean for less packaging. So it's not too much work, and I'm sure there'll be people out there who'll be willing to help you out. So. So that's cool. So do you have any further plans to do more Infoblox integration? I know they have other products.
So right now, the only one that we have is their Grid Manager product. So right now, what we have seems to be working well for us. So I mean, for me, certainly if people request features, if I can get access to the needed products to kick the tires on them, I would certainly love to do that. And I'm sure, as we start using this more and more and really kind of go production with our new cluster, I'll be amazed if we don't hit some sort of issue or some little, kink in the road where, we need to adjust the plugin a little bit or add some more flexibility. So I certainly expect to, be kind of doing ongoing maintenance. But yeah, like I said, right now, the only Infoblox product we have in-house is their Grid Manager. So that's where my focus has been.
Sure. Cool. I know I heard some interest in the IPAM stuff, certainly. So hopefully we can maybe get a conversation going on that at some point.
Yeah.
Because obviously Foreman already supports things like free IPA and LDAP and Active Directory and so on. So exactly. It would be interesting to see if we could extend that. I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah.
So okay, that's cool. We're going really fast today, actually. You're gonna have to do a demo of this, right? Not that I think it's not the most demoable thing, right? It's
I can show example config files, basically.
Create a host. Oh, look, there's records. Well, I mean, you could create a host and show it showing up in Infoblox, but I'm sure everyone believes you anyway. So, and I'm guessing the configuration files are not very complicated. So,
right.
Yeah, it's which provider do you want? Infoblox. There we go. Where is it?
Yeah, basically, yeah. For the DNS plugin, you essentially just say, this is my Infoblox server. You give it a username and password to be able to log into the API with. For the DHCP plugin, it's basically same thing. For that, you can also pass. There's an API version you can pass. The plugin defaults to 2.0, which is what I've found works for our implementation, but you could set that to a different API version if you needed. And then you basically say whether you want a host record or a fixed address records created. And then there's also the option of whether or not to create those records inside a DHCP range or kind of outside. So in Infoblox, you can create network scope. And then within that, you can have a DHCP range of addresses that get handed out, and you can create records either inside that range or outside. And the calls to do so are just slightly different. One is you create the record on the network level, and one you create it on the range level. So depending on your implementation, you might want to choose one or the other. For us, we found we had to actually enable a specific Infoblox option to allow fixed address changes to not require a restart. With otherwise, if you're familiar with ISC DHCP, basically you're adding a config file, right? And you add the config file, you might add a record, and you have to bounce DHCP to read the config file. With Infoblox, it's basically that under the covers, but with it being load balanced and us not being the only tenants basically of Infoblox, we didn't want to be bouncing it constantly. We'll fail over, so it should be safe. But if someone else had pending changes that weren't ready, we didn't want to be the people, restarting and reading in changes that weren't ready to go. And luckily in Infoblox, there is and it's actually documented, a setting to allow specifically fixed address changes to become, immediately active without having to restart, which was huge when I found that, because I really didn't want to be making API calls to reboot the Infoblox cluster all the time.
Nice. Yeah, you don't want to do that, that's for sure. But it's an interesting point, actually, about inside and outside ranges, because this comes up in discovery, actually, if you're starting to look at discovery, because there is a known rare race condition where obviously you get a DHCP lease when the machine boots in an unknown state, and then another one once it's been provisioned, and it is potentially possible to get a collision because of how ISC DHCP works, right? So the recommendation is always to have your fixed addresses outside of the DHCP pool. And so the fact that you can do that is obviously a good thing. So it's worth making that point. Cool. Okay. Well, let's. I think. I don't know. Is there much more we can cover on Infoblox? If we should we move on? Should we pick a new topic? Is there much more we can say?
I don't know how, and like I said, it's to me, Infoblox has been pretty straightforward. Like I said, a very enterprisey version of the same old DNS dhcp. Used to if you're familiar with those concepts, it's all there with a kind of fancy web GUI on it, and like I said, a nice API. Yeah, I mean, certainly if anyone has any questions, more than happy to talk about experience with it and how it's gone. Yeah.
I'm keeping an eye out. I don't see any more questions just now. For those watching, do ask. We want to hear your input. I think in terms of how it's gone, I mean, we've covered basically the sort of the rough development process. But let's widen that out a little bit. One of the things I put as a potential agenda to talk about was about how one of the things we try and do in Foreman, right, is to fit into an existing infrastructure. I think that's something that does set us apart. I mean, so many projects out there want you to start with a green field, right?
Sure.
And they want to take over everything. And this leads to some, what do I want? Dissonance when people come in and realize that Foreman isn't going to take over your DNS and DHCP, but they were expecting it to. So like, what? I have to reconfigure these things myself? What's that all about? And that comes up an awful lot. But from your perspective as someone who came in and not only wanted to use Foreman, but had these other enterprisey things to integrate with, other, let's not say enterprise, let's say third-party systems, because it could be anything, right? It could be another open source tool. They could be both. Can have enterprise open source, that's fine. You can find yourself in a situation where you've got stuff to integrate with. So what would be your advice as someone who's just done this recently, right? What's your take on integrating Foreman into a new infrastructure? Well, sorry, integrating a new Foreman into an existing infrastructure.
Sure. So I mean, I'd certainly kind of start small. Start with the basics. For me, even in this kind of new implementation, I started with Foreman again. Kind of where I started with Foreman originally with just reporting. I was building a new Puppet 4 infrastructure, and I knew I wanted Foreman for provisioning, down the road, and certainly to be able to hook it into DNS, DHCP, and hopefully lots of other things. But I really want to start with just okay, let's get Foreman up, let's get reports going there, and kind of just start with that. So I'd certainly say start small. And the thing I've always really liked about the Foreman project is that you can kind of take little pieces as you go. You can just start with reporting and then work on facts. And if you want to use this ENC, do that as a separate step. And turn on the smart-proxy and enable features kind of bit by bit as you go, and kind of get each one working the way you want, kind of end to end before kind of going whole hog and saying it's my Puppet Master and my ENC and running DNS, DHCP and provisioning and virtualization, orchestration, and kind of everything forced down your throat. You can really just pick off little bits. So that's certainly where I've started, and that's where I'd say for other people to start. Just start small and take little bits as you need.
Good answer. Good answer. But then also, you can take it further, right? You take those pieces, but then if you come up against a wall, if you, as you say, you hit Infoblox, but we could talk about monitoring. We could talk about things like rack tables. We could talk about, any third party like CMDB type stuff, anything, right? Where you've got information that needs to be exchanged. I won't say that Foreman should always be the sort of source of truth in your network, although clearly I think it should, but I'm biased. But you don't want to be fractured, right? You don't want to have to keep 7 different screens up on your fishbowl, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not helpful. So where you hit these systems, you've obviously had good experience building out plugins to help you talk to these systems, right? And I think the message we want to get across is that that's totally doable. And that the community is here to help you as well. Although in your case, you didn't need it anyway. So
I consider myself lucky that a bunch of work was done for me, and it was pretty straightforward. But I've been a lurker on the mailing list for quite some time, so I've certainly seen that community in action of folks helping each other, and that's one of the things I love about open source is that folks are there to help each other. There's always, you can go back and look at, other people's commits, other people's PRs, look and see how someone solved maybe not the same problem, but, a similar one, recently or, maybe just a few years ago. So yeah, it's been great.
That's good to hear. I'll choose my words carefully. I think you were very lucky with the timing. Clearly, the fact that it just worked out of the box was not luck at all.
Yeah, I think if I started, 6 months ago, kind of the fact that there weren't or at least I don't believe there were the templates written yet, and the ability to use a plugin, for the smart proxy. I'm not saying I wouldn't have done it or that I wouldn't have tried, but it certainly would have, at the start, kind of seemed like a bigger task than, write a couple classes and make a gem out of it.
Yeah, and of course there was Avowed's Power DNS plugin as well, right? So
yep.
I don't know whether that served as a useful reference as well.
Yep, it absolutely was, actually.
Yeah, big shout out to him. He's obviously a very active member of the dev community, and pretty much the first person to go and test drive Dimitri's changes to that section of the proxy. So the two of them really ironed out a lot of problems with it and came back with some good stuff. So I'm really happy to see that's working well. And I mean, I guess the other message here is obviously that we want to hear about this stuff, right? Because there's so many people out there writing plugins and we never hear about them. I talk to people all the time. I do these case studies and sometimes I don't, and they don't want to or whatever, but there's tons of people writing plugins. It's really pretty extensible at this point, and yeah, you don't always hear about it. So do come tell us about it. We want to hear about it. You might get on a case study. It'd be great. Okay, cool. So let's as I said, we're going really fast. Normally these things take like 45 minutes, and we've only been out 25 minutes, but that's usually because there's demos and things to talk about.
Sure.
And those kind of things. So these things always take forever if you start digging into the code. So to recap, the plugins are available as obviously source code on GitHub, and that's SJOBoo on GitHub as well, right?
Yep, that's right.
Cool.
Yep.
I'll put links in the video description in the show notes, just to reiterate for people where to find them. And they're also on Ruby Gems, obviously.
Yep.
But we've yet to sort out the packaging, as we were talking about earlier. But that'll get done. I'm relatively certain that you can get some help with that. I think quite a few people are interested in that. Cool. Okay. Well, let's chit chat then, and we've got time to kill. And I'm not gonna force us to use up the entire hour because that would get rather dull and boring, right? But let's chit chat for a bit. Let's talk a little bit about where you're at with Foreman in general. I mean, you mentioned Puppet 4 there. Have you tried RC1 yet? 112 RC1?
I haven't. I haven't had time to kind of spin up a little demo environment of it. We're on so we're on 111. It actually didn't take that much work to get it going in a Puppet 4 environment. It's really a matter of, I'm using the official Foreman, Puppet modules to spin it up and spin the smart proxy up. It's really a matter of just kind of tweaking some bits there. Whenever I've installed Foreman, I've had an existing Puppet infrastructure. And Foreman might be like the first thing I add to that infrastructure, but I tend to, kind of build out the Puppet infrastructure first. And then Foreman comes after for reporting, and then other things. So yeah, getting that going in a 4 infrastructure wasn't that hard. I'm not using it to manage the CA currently, but I use using the great I believe it's the Foreman hooks plugin. Actually, just use that. Then basically wrote up a script that makes the right API calls kind of for me to essentially kind of do that. It's then kind of out of channel, if you will. Yeah. So that integration, is still there, just not as direct as it could be. So yeah, I'm excited to look at the RC, when I get them in, to see if I can kind of back out some of those customizations and use the Puppet 4 integration. Cool.
I mean, I can agree with you. I'm a big Arch Linux user in my house, and they went to Puppet 4 ages ago. So eventually I gave up pinning all my packages and just upgraded once 111 was out and dealt with it. And I agree, it really wasn't that bad. There was a few small breakages in the proxy.
Yeah.
Needed to do a few gem installs, but it was fine. It's been fine ever since. I will say I did a demo. I don't know if you caught it. For those who didn't, who are watching this, if you go back through the community demo archives, a couple of episodes, I think it was the last but one, we did a live demo of running the Foreman installer from well, it was nightly obviously, but 112 basically. I did it literally the day after the last piece got merged, and it all just worked. It was fantastic. So yeah, it's good to see that coming finally. So that'll be something for you to enjoy when that comes out, hopefully at the start of July. So that's cool. So I'm gonna pry a little bit. When you've been in the community for a long time, you've been lurking for a long time. What was your first version of Foreman?
So I actually can't. I could probably dig around for a few minutes and find out. I know it was way back. It was I'd like to say around 2010 time frame, maybe 2011, but I think it was more 2010. Yeah, so I mean, Puppet Dashboard was still a thing.
Wow.
It kind of existed, and didn't seem to scale super well. PuppetDB wasn't out yet. And yeah, it was really, and there was no provisioning informant. It really just was the reporting dashboard. I don't even know if it could have been an ENC yet. So it was certainly the early days. It seemed like.
Wow, fantastic! You should go see
Yeah.
if you've got any old screenshots. That'd be great.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I moved on from that position a couple years ago, and I have a snapshot of my old code base, but I think at the time Foreman was kind of a little one-offy install I had done on the side, or wasn't quite as obsessed about having the code base be the standard for everything in the environment.
Yeah. It sounds like you're a similar vintage to me. I think I came in at about 0.3. That was the first version I installed in my last job, which was
that sounds about right.
Hot off the back of Puppet Camp Amsterdam back in 2011. So
Nice.
that was fun. Yeah, cool. So obviously you've seen a lot of change in Foreman over the years. What are your thoughts on sort of where we're going? What needs to be done still? What's missing? Things like that.
Sure. So I mean, I've really enjoyed working with the Foreman. For this is my third job where I've used it, and second one where I've used at least some level of provisioning. I think it's great. I think the smart-proxy architecture is excellent. That way the Foreman itself isn't directly trying to reach into all sorts of bits of architecture. You're not having breaking changes where I updated some service over here and now I have to wait for the Foreman to do a release to catch up to it. The fact that Foreman can kind of abstract that to the smart-proxy, which then now has the different providers available, it just gives it a lot of flexibility where you can really customize it. And as I brought it in-house here and kind of explained to the folks here, of how the smart-proxy works, kind of show them the power. Listen, we could we don't need just one smart-proxy. We could have 20 if we wanted to, and they could each be doing little bits where we want them to. If we need to have walls between things, we can. And we don't need Foreman to be talking directly to these things. It's it has to talk to its proxy, and that's that nice layer of abstraction. So I've really found that valuable. The integration with things like VMware or Google Compute or AWS has been great. We're using the VMware integration heavily here, especially we're kind of demoing and developing this new HPC environment we're building. So I found it great. I literally, kind of on a daily basis, go into the interface and, I type a node name and basically that's about it and hit submit. And, I have a VM spun up for me that's added the DNS and DHCP for me and, starts running Puppet during Kickstart and, kind of enters the environment on its own with, next to no effort. So having Foreman, kind of there to orchestrate all that for me is, especially the fact that it's such a nice web interface and there's, the Hammer CLI and there's an API. Kind of anyone in my group can use it. Depending on how they want to use it. If they want to write scripts around it, they can. If they want to just go in and click buttons, they can. So it's been great.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And I have to agree with you. I never get tired of the simplicity of spinning up VMs for testing.
Yes.
To the point where I think I've got it down to one command line call to Hammer now. I will wrap a script around Hammer that supplies all the host group IDs and all that kind of thing. It's just like, go build me a host. And there's lots of little tweaks you can do as well. I've been meaning to get a tips and tricks video sequence up at some point, just little 5-minute videos of things people don't know about the UI and stuff like that, which I think would be good fun. Okay. So what's missing? What's missing in your opinion? For example, the one I always used to bring up was IPv6, but now we've got Timo, our new committer on core, who's busily working on providing IPv6 support. So I can't use that anymore.
What's missing? Man, I mean, not that much right now. I think there's, with the smart-proxy, certainly other integrations that can be made in the future. We're looking at Sensu for our new HPC environment for monitoring. It'd be cool to be able to, on a host page in Foreman, see, the status of the system and maybe some like alert history. Likewise, we're using Console to do service registration and discovery, which if people out there aren't familiar with console, it's by HashiCorp. It's awesome, kind of little distributed key value store. It'd be really cool to be able to hook into that. There's a great API there to go look at a host and see what services it offers, and have the host kind of dynamically provide that. So certainly more room for more integration, but I mean right now I'd hardly say those things are missing as they're glaring holes. They're just excellent places where it could be extended. You mentioned rack tables before. I believe we're probably going to be using, I believe it's called device 43 for kind of our physical kind of where are things. So again, having integration, kind of maybe a location smart proxy endpoint, with different plugins where you can easily look at a host and see where it is, or query what hosts are in this rack, or this row in the data center. I've done a little bit of that in the past with kind of stuffing facts in there to query Puppet facts about that, but having that as kind of a first class citizen in the UI and database would be excellent.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. I've spoken about monitoring with other people in the past, and there's a guy in the Isinga team who has been slowly working on an Isinga 2 plugin for similar ideas. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Cockpit.
Yeah, slightly.
So Cockpit's cool. For those who don't know, it's a tool for kind of getting access and information on your machines remotely. And even running commands on them. It's very cool. And so one of our main developers, Daniel, wrote a Foreman-Cockpit plugin. And I don't want to go into Cockpit, but the reason I'm picking that out is it does a really cool thing, because it replaces the Puppet graphs on the host page with data from Cockpit. Now, if you can do that with Cockpit, you can do that with anything else, right? And monitoring is a great example of this one. Let's pull a global status, like is any check failing? Because we've got the multiple status fields in 1.11 now on that host page. So you can have an extra status added there. What's the monitoring status? You could chuck a couple of graphs, host load or whatever, pull that out of the monitoring system. And you don't want to be the monitoring system.
Yeah.
We're not trying to replace all the tools, right? That doesn't work. It's not Unix philosophy. We're a good management console. We're not a monitoring shop. But if you could pull a little bit of data out of the API and just give you that central point of truth, so that oh, something is failing. Let's go and have a look at it. Click through. Now I'm in Isinga, Sensu, whatever, right? So that'd be quite interesting. And then the rack table thing, yeah, I agree with you. I think again, we can replace those frames on the host page. So let's do most of these racking tools will give you graphics of like rack position and stuff, right? Maybe we can get at those. That would be cool. Or at least draw our own from API data or something,
Sure.
Quite interesting. So, there's still tons of interesting plugins to write, I think. We're not short of integration points, right? The world
that's right. Yeah, there's always more things to hook into.
The world doesn't get any simpler, does it? And you mentioned HashiCorp as well. It's like, will they stop inventing all the cool stuff and leave some fun for the rest of us?
I know, yeah.
Every single time. Like, what, really? Oh, my God. So, okay, I think I'm just going to do a quick check around the channels to see if anyone's left us any questions. I don't see any just now. So I think we're running out of steam. Well, it's been about 40 minutes. I think that's a fair case study. I don't want to shortchange people having booked an hour out of their time to watch us. But we've covered a fair bit there, and I think the real takeaway, obviously the point of these case study videos is often to try and use them as convincers, if you like, for people who are sort of looking at Foreman and trying to think, is this for them, sort of thing. And if they are in a situation where they've got a lot of third-party systems, I hope this one is a good argument for saying, no, look, get started small for sure, but you will be able to get talking to those systems, assuming what you're trying to integrate with has a good API. This is always the problem we have with VMware, right? Because you mentioned VMware. It's like, VMware is massive, but it does not have the best API.
Yes.
So this has been a constant pain point, right? And we do what we can.
Yeah. No, I found the VMware integration. It took me a little bit to kind of get going. And some of that might be kind of the specifics of our environment, but now that it's going, it's pretty seamless from my end now. So it's great.
That's great. That's good to hear. So that's great. So, okay. Unless if you got any closing comments, shout outs you want to make, anything like that?
No, I mean, like I said, thanks for inviting me on. And for, once I kind of, stopped lurking on the mailing list and popped up, for welcoming me into the community. Like I said, I've been following the project for a while now. And I think it's great, and I'm sure it'll continue to be great. And, yeah, if anyone, wants to help or take a look at the plugins, you know, I welcome feedback, commits, PRs, you know, anything you want. And yeah, hopefully I'll get some time to package. But if anyone else beats me to it, I'll be happy about that too.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, with that, then I think it's time to wrap it up. So let me just get my closing slide. So yeah, thanks very much to you, Matt, for coming on today and spending a bit of time with us, taking some time out of your busy day. I know it's not exactly the latest of morning times over there right now.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. So yeah, this has been another great case study. So if you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like on the video. It lets me know that you want to see more of this kind of content in the future. If you want to be notified about more of this stuff, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter. You can also go and look at our events page on the website, foreman.org/events, where we put up all of the events, physical and virtual. But other than that, this has been Gilvin with another case study. Thanks very much for watching. Do take care.